Hello and welcome to LovoCast episode 5, where I am joined by my illustrious friend Diaper, as you can see on the screen, the call sign that we know you by and what you've chosen there. Welcome to the LovoCast, Mr. Diaper.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, excellent to have you. So we know each other from a little ways back. We've been flying together in a DCS sort of group. I mean, it's probably going on years now, the way time flies with these things.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking time to speak with me. You are a little bit of a more credible. Makes it sound like the people before have been like really not credible, but you've got more credibility than most of my friends. Do you want to sort of tell us a little bit about where you are currently in your vocation and perhaps how that might associate with the things we enjoy in DCS?
Okay. Actually, I'm a flight surgeon with the German Air Force. The picture you chose for your background is very fitting because my home unit is a Eurofighter unit. Okay, you probably should not lean too far. The green screen went inactive. And that also got me into DCS because when I had my first flight surgeon's course, it was through the COVID years, 2020 back then. And normally when you do a flight surgeon's course, you have actual hands-on time with anything that flies. So several courses before us, they did a glider flying, or they went at least to a Eurofighter unit, which is close to the facility where we learned. But with all the restrictions, we couldn't go there, or we couldn't go to the glider place.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that we could do was get an external company in that had a movable F-18 cockpit and a 72-inch flat screen, which they flanged in front of this cockpit. And so we went into a maintenance hall where we had the course, and then we flew 15 minutes of DCS, which I found out afterwards.
Was this before or after you were aware of DCS? Like, was that your
that
first
was
time
the
at
second
DCS?
I
That
got
second
aware
time?
of DCS.
Right.
No,
right,
that was the
okay.
exact second. So
Ah.
I learned that day that DCS
With a
exists.
full sim pit, like many of us, I'm
Yeah.
sure, would be extremely jealous of.
Yeah, that was very impressive. And so I started DCSing. Through the Wingman Finder, I found our little lovely group.
It is a nice group. Lots of nice people. So for those who might not be aware, what is a flight surgeon? Because it sounds like perhaps somebody on the back of a Chinook operating on people coming out of a war zone. Do you know what I mean? You put together flight and surgeon, it might sort of bring up those images. But what exactly is it to someone who is not in the military? How they understand it?
Yeah, flight surgeon is the military term for an aeromedical examiner. So the guy, the girl that checks on pilots or on controllers if they are fit to do their deed. So are there any issues health-wise or psychological-wise that would interfere with the flight safety?
Right. And the way you phrased that, it sounds like obviously your responsibilities are to the military in question, in this case, the Luftwaffe. Is there how much of it is an aspect of caring and providing medical care to the individuals, and how much of it is ascertaining on behalf of the military whether or not these people are fit to perform their duties?
Where I'm now at the Tactical Fighter Wing, I'm more or less their GP 80% of the time. So I care if they've got a sneeze or something like that. And once in a year, they have to renew their medical license, and then I'm the examiner.
Right.
And of course, if there's anything due the course of the year that would impact their license, we would call it, we have to wear two hats constantly, because the one is the GP hat and the other one is the examiner hat. And sometimes I have to change those hats mid-conversation. If I have to say, okay, now we found something out about your health that would not cost you your license, but at least put a hold for several weeks or even months on it until we have figured it out or until we have treated it. And so sometimes I have to switch those roles.
That's interesting. I know we're sort of deep diving before we've perhaps gone through some of the startup questions, but I'm curious from the way you say that, how that plays out day to day, because I've no doubt that you are obviously, building professional and personal relationships with these with the aircrew you treat. How could you not? And to some degree, you hold the keys to their immediate flying, which is probably the thing they love, but then also, there's ramifications there into their career, plausibly. So have you found that you, I mean, I know your current duty, so I have to be careful. I don't want to ask you a question that you're not going to want to answer. I don't want to ask you, do you ever go outside of the regulations for the sake of helping your friends? Because, that would be an unfair question, and you probably wouldn't answer it. But are there? Well, I guess what it might be a reasonable question is: are there scope within the regulations that you could reasonably employ to work with your patients before you have to enact some sort of measures, some sort of procedure to look at whether or not that you ground them? That was a bit of a rambly question. Do you want me to clarify what I'm asking there? I went on for quite a while.
I hope I got
okay.
your where you were going. So if there's any leeway or some parts where I can decide, is this still inside the green zone, or is this...
I'll pop it up. I'll pop it up.
Thanks very much. Or is this already behind the red line?
Yeah.
So in our regulations, we have several red lines, like there are several diseases or conditions that are clearly not compatible with flying or with controlling aircraft. And there's no room to wiggle around that. But there's also in the civilian regulation or in the military regulation the so-called rubber band paragraph. So there are always like openly phrased paragraphs, or at least a paragraph per regulation that says if there's anything that would impact the immediate control over the aircraft that you're flying, or the control over the aircraft you are controlling from the tower, the radar, whatever, then this would deem unfit.
Hey everyone, Lovo here. Quick correction that Diaper wanted me to slot in here. He's about to talk about diabetes type 2. And the truth of the matter is that pilots with diabetes type 2 can only be ruled fit to fly if they do not require medication. So please bear that in mind when you're about to listen to the next segment. Thank you.
It's not, okay, if you've got, for example, diabetes type 2, you're not fit to fly. This is not in the regulation. But if I try to get a good example right now. So, for example, a controller has a desk job, and if he broke his leg, this would be a severe medical condition. But with a broken leg, you can still sit in a chair. So the regulation says they should have full control of their arms and legs, but we came several times with our superior medical facility in the German Air Force to conclusion that, for example, controllers can have problems with the legs because they can still work. So there's a little bit of leeway in there. Or if there's a little or a minor medical condition that is not in the regulation itself, so it is spoken out or written out, like, for example, diabetes type 1, that's always a no-go. Then I can decide, is this something that would make you duty not in flight or would make you unfit for flying, either on a permanent basis or on a, I'm not finding the right word now, but for a certain amount of time.
Okay. So I suppose then in many cases it's worthwhile, or at least that encourages not reactionary, but I'm blanked on the word now. Like forward thinking from those people to say, because if someone thought they were pre-diabetic, it's in their interest to come to you early and work to avoid. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's been lots of times in this conversation where I exposed my ignorance about medical things, so feel free to correct me on anything I say wrong. But if someone finds themselves approaching, or they think they're approaching a condition that could disqualify them, it's in their interest to come to you and work on not getting to that stage.
Yeah, now we're coming into the personal field.
Okay.
Because so that is clearly my personal interpretation of being a flight surgeon at a certain unit, because you are their family doctor. So I try to be a person that they can trust, and that they can trust their license with. So the whole I hope that's the right word, predicament is the training of these guys and girls was very expensive, and also took a lot of time. So I think it was very unrespectful to throw all that away just because I decide they cannot fly for a minor thing. If it's behind the red lines, I will tell them they are no longer fit to hold up their license.
Yeah, it's out
But
of your
if it's
hands at that
something,
point.
but if it's something in my power to help before it gets worse, or if we can diminish the time that they are not able to act on their license, then I will try that. And a big goal of mine is to communicate this with my patients. And this is a more modern approach to all of this, because in pilots and controllers' minds, the flight surgeon service of the armed forces had a bad reputation, because in former years we had way more personnel, and so we could tell people, okay, you're no longer fit, because we've got an abundance of new pilots and controllers growing up. But nowadays, with training costs increasing, with the training time increasing, and the demographic of Germany, so less kids, less new pilots, we try to get those people fly longer, not especially over the course of their life. So you wouldn't sit a 59-year, 61-year-old guy in a Eurofighter. That would probably not work out.
You're dashing some dreams now.
At least not for the first time. But we try to get them at least back in the cockpit if something happens or if something occurs, if it's possible with the regulations. And the thing is with the mindset for German military aviation is that we don't want to be lesser than the civilian aviation in regards to the regulations. So everything that is true for the civilian regulation also have to apply for the military. So if there's something in the EU regulation that would prohibit someone from flying, we also include that in our regulation. So we do not have full control, I would say, of what is possible or not. But sometimes the Center for Aeromedical Medication, not aeromedical medication, no, the Center for Aeromedical and
is this the European body of flight surgeons of sort of?
No, not the European.
Health?
I'm trying to translate off the get-go the Zentrum für Luft- und Raumfahrtmedizin.
Okay.
So Center for Aero and Space Medicine. Now I got it. Of the Luftwaffe.
Right.
They do not create the regulation. That's a whole other department, but they work with the regulation for the military aviation licensing regarding the medical stuff. And so they can give waivers, but of course, it's very hard to give a waiver if the EU regulation says, okay, this is not possible. If it was, for example, something that does not apply for civilian aviation, so everything regarding 9G fighter jets, in Germany at least, we are, or the Center for Aeromedical Stuff is the sole body that controls what is possible or what is not possible. But everything beneath the fighter jet thing, so helicopters, transport, this has to be at least in somehow synchronization with the civilian regulation.
Right. Is that a foundation that the tactical jets are built on? So there are these criteria that the European body puts out that could still disqualify a fighter jet pilot, and then
so if you're
you also
not
do
fit
stuff on
to
top
fly
of that.
an Airbus A320, A3, tongue aquaplaning today, A320. So if you're not fit to fly transporters, you're certainly not fit to fly a Eurofighter.
I suppose it makes sense if you put it like that. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting. It got me thinking when you were talking about the start of the question when we were speaking about pilots and their sort of honesty, and it's an interesting comparison with a non-military. Oh, have I frozen? I'm back.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
So you're frozen.
Yeah. Comparing a non-military GP and who might, have people coming into them, and then having to persuade these patients to be honest. Tell me what drugs you've had. I don't care. I need to treat you. I can't give you this medication. It interacts with some recreational drug. I don't want to kill you. Please tell me. Or, I don't care if you've had sex and you're 17. Be honest with me. Kind of conversations. And I imagine you're probably not having those conversations. You've probably got a slightly older, slightly more mature patient base. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But in the similar way of
at least they're not 17 when they come to me.
They've at least had a certain amount of training to get to you, I imagine. But you're probably in a similar way trying to persuade them to be honest with you, but you can't force them to be.
No.
And there's almost two cultures, as friendly as I'm sure you are with the patients. The conversations they might have amongst themselves without you there in ready rooms and briefing tables and bars. The old guard there could be advising the young guard certain things. And then you've got no control about that. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing. You're not trying to say to them, tell me if you've had ecstasy. It's please do be honest with me so something doesn't actually affect your health negatively in the future.
Yeah, that was kind of the conclusion that I wanted to come to with my complicated and convoluted type of speaking. So I and my colleagues try to be trustworthy docs for our personnel, but we know that it's hard for them to open up because we could kill their license. And so we try to be those trustworthy flight surgeons to get them to open up, to tell us if anything happens, even if it's minor or if it's a little bit bigger, so that we can find a way to get their license back if it's possible. Because most of the times, if you wait on something in the medical field and it is infringing on your license, that won't get better if you wait too long. And so we try to get those this trust with them. So we try to participate in social events with them. We try to be seen in the weather briefing, for example, so that they know our faces, they know how we tick, and after months or even years, they will probably open up.
Is it in their hands? Like, I appreciate you saying you can control your presence, you can control your attendance to things like whether you can be in their world,
Yeah,
but you can't force them to come and see you, or maybe you can in the military. I don't know, but do you see what I'm saying? Like you can present, you can be as ethical as you can be as trustworthy as you can, and you can be available. But for them to make an appointment with you or to walk in and knock on your door and say, I want to talk about XYZ, it's entirely in their hands.
yeah, of course. So I could force them to come to me. That's one of the benefits in the military, but I cannot force them to talk to me, especially not what they will talk about. Um, so the only chance that I will get an information that they to withhold is the wrong word, because generally, at least the people that I got to know were pretty open. But sometimes they will discuss things among themselves, and then they will sort it out. Um, but it would be better if they would come up front. And I totally understand that for a new flight surgeon in the unit, um, it's more difficult because they, like dogs, they will have to check out, does he, fit into the flock, or whatever the term for dogs is in the family. Um, and then they will open up, maybe a little later, maybe a little bit earlier, depending on how you are perceived.
I suppose if they've been, to continue the metaphor, if they've been bitten in the past, then
Yeah.
they might be less likely to trust again, wouldn't they?
But I make it sound so secretive, because that's just more or less something that is in my head that could happen. As far as I know, nobody withheld something from me or from our office so far. So that's just something that I heard from the past, from when the flight surgeon service was a dangerous place to go to.
Right, yeah.
And
More
so
adversarial.
yeah, and so that's something that is like imprinted in my mind to do better, or to at least do differently. And so
I imagine
I've built my
you,
day around it.
yeah, I imagine you would be foolish to ignore your impression on them. Like you ignore that on your own peril. Like if you would have to be squeaky clean to enable them to trust you. You know what I mean? If because we're talking about significant impacts on their lives and their livelihood and the things that they love to do. So I imagine you must present. And I don't imagine this is necessarily a struggle for you, because you're obviously a wonderful person, but you must present in that fashion constantly. It's to some extent you can build trust. I'm speculating here. To some extent you can build trust, but if at any point you give them a reason to doubt that, even if it's years later, then perhaps you could change their impression of you. Or am I wrong? Or is that a bad take?
I don't know if I'm squeaky clean, to pick something from the beginning,
The correct
but
amount of squeak. Like I imagine there's probably an appropriate path to walk to give the correct impression. Perhaps not wholly, because then they wouldn't want to talk about the time that they got drunk and fell out of a window. But
but at least I try to be approachable. So
yeah.
coming back to DCS, that also helped to be approachable, because I learned a lot of the pilot lingo before I even got to the unit. Because when I started the flight surgeon duty, I was at the Center for Aero and Space Medicine of the Luftwaffe. So I was on the dark side of the force. because this unit is detached from any flying unit. So it's a center, a medical center, and the pilots come there every 3 years to get a bigger checkup, all by specialists of several departments, so cardiology, ENT, and whatnot. And so I learned flight surgeon service from that perspective. Highly detached, and you have no contact with kerosene or something like that. And then I transitioned into the unit, and there, flying with you guys, reading some NATOPs, reading brevity codes, or at least the translation for brevity codes, helped a lot to understand from day one in the unit what they were talking about. And
right, so
they
that implies
found
that
out
you
pretty
didn't get
fast.
that before. That implies that the up to that point, up to you literally walk in the door of the flying unit, you're not told about brevity
No,
or lingo or slang.
no, because I studied medicine at Charité in Berlin, so that's a civilian university.
Right.
I was wearing uniform already back then, but you get, what's a perfect translation for that? I was on vacation for 6 years, and so I didn't have to wear the uniform in uni,
Right.
but
But you did anyway.
no. Depends on where you live in Berlin. That is not the brightest idea to wear a uniform.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
And so I studied in a civilian university. I did my internship after that at the Armed Forces Hospital in Berlin, where you wear a uniform. But that's very medical centered and focused. And so you don't learn something about military aviation. And you already also don't have time for that. Because you work in night shifts, late shifts, changing shifts, and you still don't know where your head is. And so flying with you guys was very helpful to get my foot into this language. And they found out pretty fast in my unit that I did understand something. And I was told by a colleague, so I'm taking that with a grain of salt, that they really respect the effort and my knowledge. And I hope that helps with the whole trustworthiness and trust building.
Well, that's interesting to hear. I mean, the sort of the holy grail from like a DCS player's perspective is getting some sort of nod from an actual fighter pilot. Do you know what I mean? Like it's to have that understanding that perhaps they're on the right track, or they're doing some things correctly, or they're saying the right thing, or not that someone such as I could ever sort of step into that world and command any kind of like credibility, but just to get that must be really satisfying. I don't know how experienced you were a DCS player at that point, but if it was me, if some people said, "Oh yeah, you're all right," I'd be quite giddy, I think, if I heard that.
So I was never an experienced DCS player. Right now, I'm more or less a peripheral raccoon. If you recall our lovely Boeing pilot, because I collected so many. I'm looking at my Simpit right now because it's under the desk, so I'm not looking at private parts or something like that. But I barely fly anymore, and I did find out like 2 days ago that my VR headset cable might be broken because I'm seeing red, green, and blue snowflakes all over the screen.
Oh, geez.
And right now is not the time to upgrade or rebuy another VR headset. And I don't have something to fly in the... My wife just came in.
Hello, wife.
Hello, wife. Bye, wife.
What was next thing?
She brought me snacks.
Oh, what an ex! That's A grade wifing right there.
Yeah, she's the best. Um, did you hear that? No. Yeah, I was never the experienced DCS player like you are with flying the F-15 and reading the documents and knowing so much stuff. And I'm like flabbergasted if I see or hear anything from you when you're talking about what to do and not what not to do in the F-15. I was like, I own that plane because I'm a raccoon, but I have no idea about it. I have literally like 5 minutes of flying time in that thing.
Well, you're out there living your life, and maybe we'll get to talk about some of your experiences. But they sound like you're pretty fantastic. So I think that's often the case. Like the people, and thank you for the kind words. But people like me, it's almost because I'm not out there having adventures, for want of a better word, that I get the time to learn so much and deep dive. I'm spend about I'm 2 days in the office, 3 days work from home, lots of freedom to do stuff at the PC, and I enjoy that, and it's good for me, and like I can focus a lot on hobbies and interests. Like some people's jobs is very demanding, and some people shift that. Their job is not. I'm not on my job. It's not demanding, but it doesn't come out. It's very much like within those hours, and doesn't need me to travel or anything like that, so that I can put more effort into my sort of spare time, my hobbies and interests, and that happens to be sort of DCS. But yeah, the people that thinking about a couple of people from the refugees, like the executive pilots and the commercial pilots, you don't see them that often because they're out there flying aircraft and doing stuff, and you're out there saving lives and breaking hearts, I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm breaking hearts.
I can see a little George Clooney in you. I can see that little. What was that show?
I've got a little bit of
ER.
gray hair right here, so maybe a little
salt
bit
and
of George.
pepper.
Yeah. It the nice thing about knowing a little bit of the cockpit. So I started with the F-18 because it was that particular plane that was back in this maintenance hall where we had our little simulation hands-on thing. That helped a lot getting to know a NATO cockpit, because a lot of the symbology is the same, or at least in a little altered way reused. And so that was especially in my first flight, which we haven't talked about, one of the biggest plus points of this job.
Yeah, we're kind of burying the lead a little bit here, but that's just how free flow and conversation. We'll definitely get to time you've spent in the cockpit for sure.
Yeah. So at my first flight with the Eurofighter, in the backseat, of course, the pilot wanted to tell me how to set up the seat height. And he told me some mark points where should be what, and from my line of sight. And he said, do you see those numbers in the top of the HUD? And it should be, I don't know, 16 in the middle. And I was asking, okay, do you mean the heading indicator? And he was like, wait, what? How do you know what it is? And so the conversation while we were rolling to the last chance started how I would know what is to be seen on a HUD. And so I admitted that I'm not avid DCS player, but at least a DCS player. I withheld that information up until that point to the pilots because I must admit I was a little bit worried how they would see that, or how would they see me knowing that I play video games or play fighter pilot in my free time, because it's a two-edged sword. It could be beneficiary, or they could also say, okay, he's a wannabe maybe a little bit too pushy or something like that, whatever. And maybe we don't trust him anymore because he's
Yeah.
strange, he's nerdy. Um, but the exact opposite happened. Um, Everybody that got to find out that I had at least digital flying experience was pretty positive about it.
Excellent. I understand exactly the point you're getting at because in my the closest I've got to that was a air museum open day where they had in air crew to talk about the planes there. You could sit in the cockpit and they would talk you through what was in the cockpit, and obviously they were dealing with people who were, like 8-year-old children who were just enthusiastic, and then giving them an overview, or probably nerdy people like me who might want to know a bit more. And I sit down and I've got like 5 minutes with this person. I'm thinking, how can I demonstrate to them that I know a little bit, and I'd like to know some stories. I like a bit more in depth. You don't have to tell me what an altimeter is, but without sounding like a wannabe or a nerd or someone who's, there's definitely things you could say that would put them off and make them think that, you see it on Discord sometimes when people speak authoritatively about something, and then some aircrew come in and go, no, you're completely wrong. That's not it at all. And that's something I've learned from first-hand experience. It's happened to me, and I've gone, right, I have to, in my phrasing, make it clear that I don't know. This is what I think it is, unless I can, even if I could cite something from an ATOPS, we know from experience now that just because it's written in the book doesn't mean that's the way it occurs in real life. So, there is definitely that moment of going, how do I gain a little bit of, how do I get on the inside track with this person? I definitely don't want to pretend like they should think I'm just like them, because I'm not. But I want them to know I'm interested and enthusiastic. So your approach to that was to, I presume you had this flight scheduled, and it was just because it's something you've got to do as a flight surgeon, and then literally in the cockpit through the intercom system you start to drop that. I know what a compass ribbon is and all these other things.
No. Yeah, because there was also a stark contrast. So the regulation says I have to fly at least once every 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And some flight surgeons don't enforce that. And normally the unit doesn't enforce it, although it's in the regulation that their flight surgeon should fly with them every 3 months, at least every 3 months. But some people don't like flying because we were not screened to be pilots. And so, for example, some people just don't enjoy it because they get air sickness, or that's in most cases air sickness is the problem. And I cannot put my head around people not liking to fly a fighter jet. So
Yeah.
maybe there are several reasons, but I cannot wrap my head around it. So the at least 2 generations in air quotation marks before me didn't fly that much. And so they only had very good doctors and flight surgeons that would take care of them, but not aviation nerds that would try to hop on the back seat and have a good time with them. So I think that was also very interesting for my pilot to have somebody in the backseat that is interested in medicine, but also in airplanes, because they hadn't had that for several months, years, whatever. So I'm not saying that the generations before me wasn't or weren't interested in airplanes, but I'm pretty sure not as much as I am.
Right. Did you find that, I mean, you sort of suggested that opened up the group to you, the air crew and your patients. Did they ask a lot of questions about how you knew and what you knew? Did they try to find out, okay, so you know a bit, how much do you know? Or was it just sort of that door opened and then naturally you were sort of in a slightly closer environment?
especially with that pilot from my first fly, that created some follow up because he was asking, okay, what did you fly there? What were you practicing? Roughly, what's your level? So not level up level, but what skills did you train on? And that was very nice to get this interest back, because my job was to be interested in them, or my job is to be interested in them. And to get this, mirrored was quite nice. And what's also part of those flying days, that you get some stick time. So the Eurofighter double seaters are all GTs, German trainer versions. So it is possible to switch the control to the backseat with a push of a button. And the regulation says...
Does that mean that they're not interconnect? They're not physically... I mean, it's fly by wire,
it's fly by
obviously,
wire.
but there's no physical mirroring of the controls as the person in the front moves them.
Only the throttle, because that would be, at least my interpretation, a security flight safety issue. If the moment you would switch control from one seat to the other, and the throttle handle would not automatically go to the place it is.
That's almost a very DCS problem, isn't it? When you swap controls in DCS and all of a sudden you're falling out of the sky.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not happening with the Eurofighter. So somebody thought about that, obviously. But as the stick is fly-by-wire, at least I haven't felt any stick movements in the backseat when the pilot is in control. So because now we're scratching the next topic, because I am very prone to air sickness, as I've told you before. And so I tried this idea to trick my head in I'm still in control of the aircraft, even though I'm not. So when I'm in the backseat and I have not control of the aircraft, I will still touch the flight stick and try to mimic the movements.
Does that look familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm at production. That's what I'm doing when you're talking. I'm getting the production ready.
Yeah. That's actually from my unit.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, of course it is.
High production value that you...
that I obviously picked that one. For those listening, I have thrown a picture of a dual-seat Luftwaffe Eurofighter, which is, as I now know, from Diaper's unit, and it's an interesting shape. It's obviously got that slightly more dorsal, bigger dorsal section here, I guess for the aerodynamics.
Yeah, the second seat takes up a lot of space, so they had to not redesign, but had to alter the design where the cockpit would fall off, because the original design for the Eurofighter is a single-seater, and it falls pretty fast off after the seat of the pilot.
I mean, this could be you.
This picture seems a little bit older. Because there are no names under the canopy rail.
Is that the correct side for it, or are they on both sides?
They are both sides. The left side is for pilots, and the right side is for the airman crew. So maintenance and weaponeering.
Well, I'm sorry to have broken your train there, because I was very interested in what you were saying. I just figured I should probably I have the ability to pull up pictures. So we got as far as the aircrew asking about what you know, and you were getting some stick time, and you were telling me the throttle is linked.
Yeah, and so I tried to trick my brain into I'm still flying, I'm still in control, because in many cases of air sickness, it's not really the more or less vertigo or the movement of the fluids in the ear that causes the air sickness. It's the loss of control,
right?
Just the mentally loss of control. And so I tried to trick my brain, and I would try to fly the airplane without flying it. So I would touch the stick and I would move it in the right direction that I would at least think that
Oh,
was the right
a
deflection of
little
the stick.
psychological trick you're playing on
Yeah.
yourself.
And the stick didn't move itself. So they are not connected, like force feedback or something like that.
So were you approaching the point that they would give you some other opportunities with stick time because you demonstrated that you'd shown interest in their world, and now they were showing interest in you as somebody who cares?
What gave me the most stick time was my air sickness.
Right.
Because our colonel, the unit's commander, said, okay, the one thing that helps with air sickness is flying, flying, flying. And so 2 days after my first flight, I had a flight with my colonel because he said, we have to fly more. And so that was a whole journey to get rid of my air sickness. I had 14 flights up until this day over the course of, I have to calculate because I haven't flown in a while because I myself got injured. So let me pull up a calendar. So in the course of 8 months, I had 14 flights, so a little bit more than one every 3 months. And I vomited 9 out of 14 times.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't vomit while I was flying with my colonel on the second flight, but I was fighting for my life not to vomit. And I felt really, really bad for 2 hours after the flight. So after we landed, I was really nauseous. And we went to our flying squadron building and to the bar. I grabbed myself a Coca-Cola. And I was standing at the bar for 2 hours just to get better. And then I drove home. And I tried to fly at least once every 2 weeks in the beginning. Then this pace I couldn't hold up due to workload and being away, having vacation. And so it trickled down to once a month. And in the end, the last, I think, 3 or 2 flights, I didn't feel nauseous, I didn't vomit, and that was a real, real good progression. And then I broke my rib and was out for 3 months. Yeah.
So because I'm wondering now if what's going to be like when you go back, I imagine.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I hope that I'm not starting from scratch, but I imagine at least the nausea will come back.
So you are an exceptional person to speak about air sickness at this point in time, I imagine, at least from that sort of tactical regime of flight, not necessarily like passenger aircraft. But did you come about it from a very medical point of view when you're trying to, because I imagine you were like, oh, I have air sickness, I don't want to have air sickness, and you've got a medical mind and a sort of that pathological mind of figuring things out, I'm sure. Oh, I'm back. So were you trying things, and were you diagnosing it and trying to work through it, and also what would you put to your overcoming it? Was it, do you think, as they said, experience, or was there something you did that you think worked for you?
So I'm coming a little bit of a history of motion sickness. So as a small kid, I couldn't drive and read something, or drive in the backseat, of course, as a kid, not driving it myself. So I couldn't be driven and reading something. That would immediately start the vomit rocket. And that went away with driving myself. So that was really a control issue because I knew how the car would turn, and so I was prepared what would happen. And then a little bit of biographical information. I'm not coming from a coastal area originally, so boats and ships weren't around. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came into contact with seasickness in a vacation while I was still studying medicine, but not before. And then I learned, okay, that's still a motion sickness that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And after flying DCS with VR goggles, that got better. A little bit of detachment between what you are seeing and what you're feeling, because in the beginning of DCSing, I had VR sickness. And
Mm.
so I flew for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, then made a break for 15 minutes and then started again. So to train myself. And so from DCSing, I learned I can unlearn my motion sickness.
Mm.
And so that was the idea of flying more and get rid of the air sickness. But over the course of my air sickness treatment, I also experimented with some medical drugs that we have, because if you are a very, very valuable soldier in the German Air Force, the highest ranking general of the Air Force can award you a so-called best prize, and you can fly once with the Eurofighter if you want to.
Oh,
And so we've got some medical drugs that we can give those people if they tell us, okay, I have troubles with motion sickness, but I
mm.
won this best prize. Can you help me with something?
So they can
And
enjoy
so,
the flight.
yeah. There are some band-aids that would transduce the drug through your skin, or the classical pills that you can take, whatever's suitable for that exact person. And so I tried to do it with those meds in my system, but that didn't work, because it's not a physical condition that I have. It's more a psychological condition,
Mm.
that I'm a little bit of a control freak, and I don't like being out of control.
I mean, as you describe it, I don't know how. I can imagine it's incredibly commonplace to get motion sickness because you're not in control and it's very borderline violent motion, I suppose. Yeah. Do I remember right? It's to do with the body. It's to do with the unexpected motion, the body thinking it's been poisoned, and
Yeah,
therefore it's
at least
it's
that's a working theory,
is it's a
as far
working
as I
theory.
know.
Hmm.
No.
Okay, so let's. I mean, we've already chewed up an hour. I'm having a great time speaking with you, but
Same here.
I think
Thanks.
people would be very angry with us if we didn't start talking about what it was like moving from not having flown in the Eurofighter to having flown in the Eurofighter, and then moving on through your subsequent flights as somebody who's like most of people listening are, I imagine, an enthusiast and a big geek for airplanes. So, what I presume you knew you were going to get a flight because it's in the regulations. So it wasn't a surprise.
Nope.
But what was it like when you found out you were going to be on the schedule for the first time with a Eurofighter?
So, starting with the you knew that you were gonna flying part before I answer your actual question. um, I worked for 14 years to get that position,
So through medical
because
school and training, and
yeah,
then your army
because
training. And
back when I was we had mandatory service back then in Germany when I entered the armed forces,
right.
and due to pure coincidence, I met a flight surgeon. And back in the day, I wanted to study medicine, but haven't thought about joining the military for that. And I just want to talk to him about how is it to be a physician in the armed forces, not especially a flight surgeon, just studying medicine and then working for the Air Force or for the Army. He was actually a flight surgeon for the Army, because he was responsible for helicopter pilots.
Hmm.
Um, and he took 1 hour of his time and talked to me. And so I got hooked up with studying medicine, and I was hooked up to be a flight surgeon, because this guy seemed pretty cool, and he actually arranged that I would be transferred to his unit to work for him
Wow.
the day after we talked. And there I learned.
So is this working for him in some sort of medical capacity, or just you're doing your service and you can go
I
and do
was
this
working
work
at
with
the
him?
flight surgeon's office
Right.
back then. The next day after I talked to him.
Wow.
Yeah, my
An
captain back then.
influential person in your history, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, my captain wasn't happy about this transition because he was informed by his superior.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he roasted me in his office, and I was like, I didn't do anything. I didn't know.
Yeah, but he can't yell at his boss, can he?
No. Yeah, and so I got transferred, and then I got hooked up with the idea of studying medicine and becoming a flight surgeon, and that was back in 2009. The end of 2009 was that. And yeah, I started to study medicine in 2010, and from day one I tried to be a flight surgeon, and every possibility that could get me there I tried to take. Yeah, so I ended up at my unit, which I'm at now, on purpose. And yeah, it was also on purpose that I would fly
Mm.
with them. um, But back then in 2009, I did not know that it was mandatory to fly with them. I just liked the idea of being around of helicopters or airplanes, pretty cool, and the personnel that is taking care of those wonderful machines. Yeah, and so how was it to fly for the first time with the Eurofighter? Um, Sickening, because I was so nervous that day. As I mentioned, I worked for it for several years to get that into that position. Um, that I was a little bit out of my mind. So the flight was scheduled at our second round. We have several rounds through the course of the day, and my unit that I'm associated with is the unit with the most flying hours through the course of a year, because we have to train new pilots and we have to train the instructor pilots. And so there are a lot of flight hours that are booked onto us. And so several times of year, or most of the times of the year, we fly 3 rounds from early morning hours, early morning hours until late evening. And I was scheduled for the round that is just after noon. And so I was at our first squadron, and was eating my lunch. And they gave me this big pile of spaghetti bolognese. And I was looking at it and I thought, I cannot eat that, at least not all of it, because it's too much and I will vomit. I know myself. I get motion sick pretty easy, or I
Mm.
used to get motion sick pretty easy. And I don't know how it is flying a Eurofighter, but probably I will get motion sickness. And if I'm filled up until my lower lip, that won't help either.
Mm.
And I was zoning out. And next time I looked down on my plate, it was completely empty. And yeah, I thought, okay, that was not the best start. And yeah, then we went to dressing up, stepping. Dress first briefing, then dressing, then stepping, getting to the flight taxi, which is a
Did you
medium-sized
understand
bus.
the briefing? Did they talk it? Did they try and talk it down to your level? Was it not necessary? Were you just sitting there going, "I can't believe I'm here.
You
I
like that
can't believe
again?
I'm hearing a flight briefing from pilots. This is what it's actually like. Oh my god, you know." Or
No.
was it so intense that you just had to hang on and you weren't thinking about those things?
So I visited several weather briefings before, and normally we've got a designated time of the day or several designated time of days regarding to those rounds where we fly, where the weather briefing is. So sorry. Um, so with general information about the weather, where the cloud layers are, and space weather and whatnot, and if there's some regulations updated, and general information for the pilots of that squadron or that wing. And so this briefing I knew pretty good back already, because I've been to the unit for 2 months at that point. almost 3 months. It was the end of August. And so that was already very good, understandable, because I haven't learned weather lingo while flying DCS, because that's not
Yeah.
too important with
Mm.
DCS.
No, you just
So
fly up, crash, respawn. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
yeah, and so that was new weather. But yeah, I got used to it, and now I understand more than at the beginning. But of course, that first flight was my first real in-briefing, where they would talk about the actual mission of that day, because that is not included in the more public briefing, because that's just only for the sortie itself. So it's only, for example, the Red Air that flies on that day. The Red Air sortie will talk to each other and brief each other. What are we trying to do today? What are regulations today? And so on and so forth. And so that day was a Red Air flight, because they like to schedule your first flight on a Red Air flight, because the Red Air normally flies a little bit relaxed, a little bit more relaxed than the Blue Air flight, because they try to be at their very best. And the Red Air tries to be good targets. If it's a newer pilot, a more predictable target. If it's
They
a
probably haven't
seasoned
got
pilot,
learning points, haven't they? They probably haven't got. We're trying to learn to do this as Red Air. We're trying to present a problem to the Blues, and there's lots of ways to do that.
Yeah. And so we went through that Red Air briefing, which was pretty easy, because it was early in the syllabus for some new pilots. So they're not their first flying of the Eurofighter, but their first months of flying the Eurofighter. So they flew predictable patterns, and they were talking about the patterns that they would fly today. So nothing too spectacular. They also said to me, okay, it might be a little bit boring to you, because we're more or less Airbus flying today, drawing circles in the sky, and then we will land again. And I was like, hey, that's way better than everything else. I'll take it. I got the briefing, and it was pretty understandable, because there was no brevity or super complicated lingo in there. Then we dressed. I got a little bit of the help from my pilot, because I was so super nervous. I tied everything down super tight. And he said, okay, you can relax with those shoelaces, because we're not pulling G's today. And so I relaced them, and then we stepped, which is the term for when you go back to the flight ops. And the chief in command for flying operations of the day, I don't know the English counterpart for that, so something like the air boss on a ship.
This is an officer in charge of who's flying on a given day.
Yeah. And you will go to him, or at least the flight lead would go to him and say, okay, we are person 1A, B, C, whatever. And our call sign is XYZ, and our mission is, and we are ready to step. Then the officer in charge will check if that's all correct. He will check if everybody is fit to fly by asking once again. Then you're going to the pilot taxi, which is a mid-sized bus with a lot of seats missing, so that you can fit with the helmet bag and all your gear inside. And then you're flying to the jet. Driving to the jet. And then it starts.
What's it like being part of that procedure? Because again, something like weather, something we don't necessarily think too much about in DCS is the startup. We've just got like a crew chief kind of thing happening with the F4, but that's a first. Like, what's it like being? Is it a lot? Does it over in a flash? What's it like that from the bus to taxiing out of wherever the jet is?
So in the beginning, it felt very, very long. So in my first 10 flights, so 2/3 of my experience, it felt very long, because I would always immediately after greeting the crew chiefs, would go in the jet and not do the walk around or something like
Of
that with the
course, yeah.
pilot, because I'm slow at strapping myself in because I haven't done it that often. So I can count to 14 right now. So they have done it hundreds of times,
Sure.
and yeah, it takes a little bit of time to strap myself in and to be sure. Okay, did I put it in the right direction? Did I do the right order? So
You
the
don't want to hold up
procession
the
of
flight,
what,
do you?
because some straps have to go under another strap or over another strap and have to be pulled in a certain direction, and you can rotate them. Mm. So there is a wrong way and a right way, but
Right.
they will both give a satisfying click sound when you put them into this central piece where you would pull all the straps in. And so it took quite some time, and I was on my own sitting in there, and the pilot was doing the walk around and typing in stuff in the system, because with nowadays aviation, everything has to be documented in a IT system.
There's a little laptop on the side, is it, that we're talking about?
Actually, there's a little office booth in the shelter where there is a
Okay.
desktop PC.
Right.
Yeah, highly secured office. And so yeah, I it felt very long to start the thing, because the starting of the Eurofighter for me began 5 or 8 minutes before for the pilot,
Mm.
and I had one Eurofighter simulator session, and from that point of view, starting the Eurofighter is pretty fast.
Mm.
um, it takes like 3 minutes or something like that, um, and that's the good thing about a very glassy cockpit thing in comparison to an A10 or an F4, where you have a gazillion of switches
Mm.
that have to be activated in a certain order. And with a flying computer like the Eurofighter, there's still some switches, and a good amount, but it's a lot, a lot, a lot less than in some older third gen fighters.
Hmm.
No.
Okay. So you started up and you're being taxied, and this is the point where your pilot finds out that you don't know a bit, right? You
Yeah,
say on the way to last chance, which is
yeah.
where the people arm or would pull pins and do the last check on the aircraft before.
Pulling pins is before taxiing.
Right.
At least I assume. Haven't checked that. But the last chance is our name for another last minute inspection by a different team of maintenance guys to
Hmm.
see if every pin was pulled, to see if anything is stuck up in the intakes, or if the brakes do look good. Yeah, so to give another level of security before taking off.
Hmm. And how does it feel as you approach the numbers for the runway you're going to be departing? And you know you're going to be departing from that runway, and you know that it's about to be a wild ride.
Yeah, I felt my heart pumping. um, yeah, that was already 10 months ago, but that was a very exciting feeling. But also, I couldn't believe it. So there was this confusing mixture of emotions, of being overly excited and thinking this is not real, but not this. Yeah, okay, this is not real. I'm so excited, but okay, this cannot be real. A more severe and sincere kind of not realization, not realizing.
Did you? How sort of safe did you feel? Because obviously you've got a helmet, you'll have a mask, you'll have fire resistant clothing and boots and gloves. I presume you're wearing gloves.
Have to.
Yeah. But nevertheless, you're sat, and we saw the picture earlier, just above the intakes of two enormous engines in an aircraft that's bobbling down a taxiway when there's noise, probably stuff you're not used to. Like, did you feel, or perhaps you never got around to thinking about it, but did it feel like you were safe and secure in this spot, or did it feel like there was like an almost overwhelming noise and
So you have to wear air protection under the helmet. So
hmm,
this little, yellow, in Germany it's called Oropax. I don't know the English
little foam
terminology.
things you squish
Yeah,
them
the
up and
foam things
then
which
and then
you
they
squish
expand.
down and then
Hmm.
so you have to wear those. Um, and so then over that is the helmet, which is already also equipped with your intercom. So that blocks out a lot of noise. So it's not that noisy in the cockpit. At least I feel that way. I don't
Okay.
know if it's really not noisy, um, but maybe you blend that out. That it's a loud environment because you assume that it's loud. And the canopy also blocks a lot of noise because nowadays I know both sides, being outside of the Eurofighter and inside of the Eurofighter. Outside is
Right.
pretty loud, and inside not at all.
Hmm.
Um, so I felt very safe because you're strapped in pretty good. As I mentioned, I was nervous, so I strapped myself really good down, so I couldn't lean forward an inch.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so that gave kind of a cozy feeling. Mm. And
Do you feel like we cheat in a way with DCS with the freedom you have to move around on your chair and look if you're doing defensive BFM? Like, do you feel like uh, that is there something they do about that? Do they loosen the straps, or do you think that
well, I think they don't strap themselves that down as I did on my first day.
right?
So there
Okay.
is a little bit of movement possible, but not too much because you really don't want to be dangling down in your Martin Baker ejection seat when you have to pull the handle, and you cannot strap uh, down while you have an emergency and thinking about ejection. So
Right.
I would assume that they set it up once when they strap themselves in, and then they leave it like that for the rest of the flight, unless they have to pee. Um, yeah. So I think they're a little bit looser than I was, and then a lot of the movement comes from the head, no,
Right. Do
no, which isn't
you?
strapped down.
I imagine that's a fair bit of your work then. A bit as a flight surgeon is necks and vertebrae, and if everything that you've got to sort of do a fight, which they take very seriously, I imagine, just comes from this bit here.
No.
Is that something that people suffer from, or are there preventative exercises people do?
So preventive exercises, there are plenty and known to the pilots. At least some talk about it that they do these exercises.
Right, so it's not
um,
enforced; it's
no,
voluntary.
as voluntary because their schedule is so full with flying duty and not flying duty that we could not put in physical exercise hours also into that schedule because that would break every schedule that they would try to make
Right.
all around those several things they have to do. And so it's just an opportunity that they are given, and the more mature pilots embrace those offers that we give, and then they do. The younger punks, they still have super squishy
Yeah.
intervertebrate discs, and they don't have any problems with that. And they have young muscles which can endure a little bit more stress and don't strain that fast. But yeah, if you're older than 28, um,
Yeah.
you feel a BFM weak, and then you talk to me or to our physiotherapist. Yeah, And that especially in BFM weeks, we see a lot more patients than in a normal week.
Mm. So we're narratively working our way through this flight. You're now past last chance, and I imagine you've gotten clearance to the end of the runway. What's going through your mind, sort of through the sort of lineup and takeoff?
Um, Lineup was something that I've seen in DCS and
Is this two
wasn't.
ship
Um,
or not a singleton?
we were a two ship,
Hmm.
but we started in trail, I think, because we weren't starting in a formation takeoff.
Okay, so just you on the runway.
Yeah, just us. And my pilot was flight lead, so we were the first on the runway for this sortie. And so we were lining up. He was asking if I was feeling okay. And then he spooled up the engines, released the brakes, and we went away. Not with reheat, not with afterburner, but those engines do pack a punch. Yeah, so I had the opportunity. My predecessor on my post, she is a avid car driver, and she has a over 700 horsepower electronic or EV Porsche,
Mm-hmm.
and this comes close. A lightweight sports car in the beginning, whereas Eurofighter will eventually be faster, but the initial acceleration is pretty comparable to a electric 700 horsepower sports car, and that's a lot.
Were you able to follow it? That's an interesting question because I imagine the first time could be entirely overwhelming, and then all of a sudden you're probably at 5,000 feet. But you have seen something similar to this in the form of DCS. Do you feel like you had a bit more presence of mind because of that, or I think you can hear me, but you can't see me.
I can hear you, but your picture froze.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna have to buy a whole new set of kit. This is all breaking on me. Do you feel like you had a bit of ability to follow what was happening because of you seeing similar things, albeit without the G forces and
that's a tough question because I have no comparison to my not knowing self.
Fair.
Yeah. But I would be so arrogant and say yes, I got a little bit more out of that flight than a normal passenger or a non pre-informed passenger.
Right, and I don't want to keep sort of tiptoeing through this. Perhaps you could sort of summarize your flights, like what you did after that, perhaps some highlights, things that you've learned from the following flights that you've had since.
Yeah. What I learned is that I was overwhelmed in the beginning with everything that came in because I didn't understand that what they were saying over the radio. So intercom was no problem because somebody was talking directly to me. But as for most military jets, you have several radios. You can have several frequencies at the same time listening to and talking to. And on top of that, the intercom.
Mm-hmm.
And for my first maybe 10, 12 flights, I mentally only heard the intercom or understood the intercom. And over the course, I got more relaxed. I understood what we were doing inside the jet, so I could think about what we were hearing from outside the jet. So that was a lesson that I learned, that it's an overwhelming task in the beginning, but with more experience, some things get easier and less demanding on your mental capacity. And so you can open up yourself for new information, for example, the radio.
Did you have to switch language? Was one radio in German and another agency you're talking to, you'd have to speak in English, or was it all German?
So normally the intercom, at least for me, I don't know how they would do it if there's a student pilot in the back or something like that. But at least with me, they talk German over the
Hmm.
intercom. But the aviation language inside the NATO is English. So
Mm.
everything that leaves the aircraft is English.
Right. So you were having to mentally, and I'm sure you're very good at this because you're clearly very fluent, but in trying to understand the radio comms, there is that moment where you have to switch language.
No. Um, so that's a little bit more complicated because you've got radio compression. So that makes it a little bit harder.
Right.
Then
Yeah. Yeah.
not everybody on the radio is a native English speaker or a very good English speaker. And so, especially in the heat of a battle,
Mm.
um, the quality of what they're saying could decrease. And so sometimes when Tower is talking to us or something, I have to listen twice to get what they were saying because especially with Tower Talk, ATC, and so I'm not an expert. Mhm. I know my basics, but if they are talking about some special procedures that are applicable for this air dome,
Mm.
um, for example, some navigational points that I've never heard of before.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
And that
example, I don't know if
implies that
it's
they didn't give
fly two
you.
point Boxstrom House or something like that.
Mm.
Um, so made up English words. Um, my brain takes longer to process what were they talking about.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
that
so
implies they didn't give you knee boards with the area on and charts with
no,
approaches. Yeah, you were a
no,
passenger in that regard.
no. We try to keep a lot of stuff on a need to know basis. And I'm just a flight surgeon. I don't have to operate this. I don't have to fly procedures.
Mm.
And so I don't need to see those documents.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I can understand.
No.
So, what would you say? Like, I think probably people listening will be interested to know to what degree you got to operate the aircraft. Like, what? I don't imagine they let you land the thing, but what did they let you do that you're comfortable going on the record about?
So at the flight with my colonel, we did a general flying profile as a mission. So we wore a singleton,
Hmm.
and he heard that I was flying in DCS, and his son is also flying in DCS. So he had an idea what it is,
Right.
and he was quite intrigued what I would do.
Hmm.
And so after he brought us into the air and set up us, I think 3,000 feet or something like that, he told me, "Okay, do you see this on the MFD? Okay, those are our waypoints. Fly those, fly along those. So just follow the flight path.
Hmm.
Roughly 2,500 feet at that and that speed." And he was, or he is still my superior. So I was flying exactly 2,500 feet and exactly the speed that he told me. And I tried not to deviate from the flight path. And after 15 or 20 minutes, he was like, he said to me, "I didn't know that you were an Airbus pilot. We are fighter pilots. Those were rough guidelines. You can fly corners. You can fly a little bit higher. You can fly a little bit lower.
Hmm.
I will tell you when there's boundaries where we cannot fly lower or higher." And so he tried to measure where I'm at with my flying, and then we went to our training area, which is for civilians a no-go zone. So you cannot
Right.
fly into that box, and there we can fly a little bit more freely because we know there is nobody else. It's a controlled airspace, and so then he asked me, "Okay, fly a little bit more like a fighter pilot." And then we pulled 7 point something Gs. And I did aileron rolls. I didn't do barrel roll, but after the flight, I tried to relearn a barrel roll to impress.
If you
my
could do a barrel
superior.
roll, that would that would impress everybody. I think that's such bastards to do.
Uh, because he still mocks me today about my Airbus flying. And yeah, that was one thing or one example of what I was allowed to fly. And then as a connection to that story, another time we were red air for one of our training sorties, and a very very experienced instructor pilot. He did learn while we were flying that I fly DCS and that I had some experience of what an aileron roll is, for example. And so he tasked me several times that I would do the flying and he would just do the radio. So I was flying circles on my own. He just said me, okay, this heading, roughly this, or not roughly, but then it's pinpoint angels, 1, 2, 3, whatever. And would tell me when to reset the mission to fly to our starting point. And at one point, he described to me, okay, we want to surprise them a little bit. So when I give you the word, you will turn our aircraft on the back, and then you will pull the stick until we fly it in the exact opposite direction. And I was saying, okay, you want me to do a split S. So he was like, yeah, exactly. Good that you know what I'm talking about. It's like, okay, yeah. So the basics of acrobatics, I at least read the articles on Wikipedia. And he was like, okay, then we can do that. And yeah, try to come out at, I think, 13,000 feet or something like that. And he gave the word, I flew, and I came out exactly at 13,000 feet. And he told me, okay, that doesn't sound like Airbus flying. Yeah. So that was a pretty cool flight. And that was also a flight where I didn't vomit, but because I was very long in control of the stick. So that helped a lot that day.
Amazing. What would you, currently, do you think that the understanding of the pilots is that of you now? Do you think they all know you as someone who's slightly more knowledgeable and capable than your average flight surgeon, or do you think that it really seeps through slowly and you're having to go through them on a sort of pilot by pilot basis?
I personally have the feeling that it doesn't seep through so fast, So a lot of those guys don't know what I unluckily used to spend my free time with. But maybe I can hop back into
and
the
money.
cockpit.
Don't forget money.
Yeah. So I don't think a lot of those guys still don't know that I fly DCS, but they know that I'm a little bit different than a foot walk-in flight surgeon.
Do you? I think I have the opportunity to ask you a question that people on DCS podcasts probably don't get to ask. And I appreciate you don't play that much because of work and life, but did your DCS playing change because of the flying you were doing? Normally it's the other way around, or did your flying change because of DCS? But I get to flip that around and say, did your interest still, I don't want to fly the A10 anymore because it's slow. Did it change how you appreciate the game?
I appreciate the briefing way more. So not actual flying part, but the briefing part, which we do regularly when we have scheduled missions.
What about the weather? Someone tell me about the weather.
I haven't asked that yet. Yeah, I tried to make our briefing times a little bit earlier so that we can indulge into the briefing a little bit more, but nobody wanted to do that.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I gave up on that. Yeah, and regarding to the flying pilot, actually, I do like the A10 more
Oh.
after I started. Also because one of our pilots is a DCS player and he owns the A10 and he loves the A10. And so we,
So a Eurofighter pilot
yeah,
plays
yeah,
DCS
yeah,
and is a big fan of the A10 and DCS.
yeah.
I can only imagine they haven't played any other module. That must be the reason why.
He owns a bunch of them. So
Oh.
he also gave me some BFM lessons on the
Mm.
BFM servers. And so he fought against my Hornet in a Hornet or in an F-16. So he he has some other possibilities to fly digitally, but he
Yeah.
really likes the A10. And so we sometimes fly together. And that makes a lot of fun with him because then I get really, really good radio calls. Yeah.
Do you? I think, as is always said, we could go on for a long time, but I think it's time to start wrapping it up because I don't want things to go over 2 hours. That's about as much as my bladder can do. So,
You have to
um,
train on that. Maybe you will get a call sign. Like,
yes, well remembered, well reminded. Why it is Diaper a call sign in the classical sense that it was given to you by a squadron, or how did you come by that name?
I came up by that name by our refugee guys when we had a real life meetup with our lovely Orca at his vineyard. And I drove from my unit to his vineyard, which is a little bit under 800 kilometers. And I didn't take a pee break. And so we decided on that evening, with me, we decided, and with my blessing, that this would be a suitable call sign for my refugee server
Right.
lifetime.
To clarify for the listeners, you didn't break for a pee, or you didn't pee.
I didn't pee, but
Right.
also, of course, or because of that, I didn't break for a pee.
Right.
I
And
only
you,
did breaks for my tiny gas tank.
uh, I'm just remembering a time that I did a survival weekend course, how to survive in the woods course, and it was 2 days with an overnight stay, and I was really intimidated by the idea of having to defecate in the wild, having to like dig a hole or like and take a crap in the hole and bury it. I didn't like the idea. You know, if you got to do it, you got to do it. Like nothing wrong with it, but personally, it seem like a fun thing to do. I learned later they actually had portaloos on the site, but my low level of stress about this situation made me not need to. It was sometimes I guess psychologically you can take care of these things. Like for about 48 hours, I didn't need to go number two. So, but yes, you're a man of stern constitution. I think we can learn from that. But Diaper is a better call sign. Did that? I presume you didn't say you haven't told that story to anyone at the actual pilots,
Um,
or at least the fact that you got a call sign from a bunch of geeks on the internet.
I did tell some people at my unit the
Okay.
call sign and the origin because with the names under the canopy rail, my
Mm.
unit makes it a social, not a social event, a what's it called? If you gift money for a good purpose, I'm not coming up with the
Charity.
thank you charity. Um, they make a charity act with naming the machines.
Oh.
Every year around Christmas, they start an auction bidding to get your name onto the aircraft, and the funds raised will go to child hospice care at our town or at our city. And so I threw in money because I wanted to have my name on an aircraft, but also to help the cause.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I won the back seat, um, the enlisted sergeant asked me what should be printed up there because I just won the right to name. It doesn't have to be my name. I could give the name of my wife or my kids or whatever.
But forget that. Tell us what you did.
Yeah, so there's my full name with, in the middle, quotation marks, Diaper,
Outstanding.
on an actual Eurofighter.
And that picture must be on a wall somewhere in your house.
Actually,
5 meters by 5 meters.
Actually, it is prohibited to photograph or take videos at our base.
Oh,
so
you had an
I
artist.
do not have a
rendition.
picture of it.
You got an artist rendition. Someone painted it for you.
But
From
we do have
memory.
an official photographer unit at our air base, but they were plastered with things to do, which were more important to take a picture of the flight surgeon's Eurofighter.
Fair enough.
So I'm waiting for them to have time to take a picture of that because I think in March or something like that, or in April, the machine came back from the let's call it repainting.
Mm-hmm.
And so for now 4 months, almost 5 months, the name is on the machine, but I hadn't had the chance to get a picture of it.
Oh no, you've been injured. I was going to ask if you've flown in it.
No, just walked past by it once.
No. Well, I hope that the official photographer gets time to take a picture, and I hope that ends up on your wall because that sounds amazing. I've got 2 final questions. One, they're probably going to start to be like regular questions. One already is, but one I haven't been asking, and I should have been asking. But let's start with a regular one. What do you love to do? It's a very open question. And you can answer it however you like. Perhaps the first thing that comes to your head. What do you love to do?
Job-wise, I love to work with people who love their jobs.
Ah, okay.
Even if they're patients and love their jobs, it helps a lot. And I really, really love that. And that's one of the big reasons why I joined flight surgeon service. Because in most of the cases, the people that come to you and are sick, they want to get better to get back at their job.
Right. So that focus or passion?
Probably mostly out of passion. And that makes my job easier and way more fun. And I love that.
Sounds like it almost becomes collaborative because you're both working to enable this person to continue serving.
No.
And last question is just, what does the future hold for you? What's on the horizon? You know, maybe near, medium, and plausibly far term, long term.
So near to medium term, I will deploy at the end of the year with another unit. Will be my first deployment.
Does that mean going outside of Germany? Or?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
No. Once again with the Eurofighter unit, but not my Eurofighter unit. That will be interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know what will expect me, what I will have to face. I'm the single German military doctor in the whole country. So there.
In that country you will
in
be
that country. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm the only German doctor there, or at least military German doctor. I don't know if there's any other German doctor in there. But,
is there a large number of options, or is it one of like maybe 2 or 3, or could it be many different things that you could plausibly deploy to?
I know exactly where I'm deploying to, but
okay,
don't want to discuss it here.
I understand.
Yeah, and so anything could happen there, and I will be responsible for it. So that's an interesting train of thought that starts there, because that's a lot of freedom that I have, but also no backup. At least not in that country. Of course, we can always send people back to Germany, but that takes time, and they need to be stable for that, and so forth. So that's an interesting thing coming up in the next few months, or in the next half a year. Long term, I will be staying with my unit for a few years. I hope to do a little bit longer, but that's not the normal course for officers in the Air Force to stay forever in the same spot. You get shifted a little bit around, which quite mean, or not quite means, it means quite often that not a little around, but quite a lot around. So I was in the south of Germany, stationed, and now I'm in the north of Germany stationed, with a distance of roughly 800 to 900 kilometers apart. And the next station I could be at could be around Cologne, which is West Germany and way to the south, or it could be with our tornado guys, which is also North Germany or Middle Germany. So could be anywhere. After a certain point, I don't have control over that.
Yeah. Are you looking to make a full career out of it? Do you feel like this is you for 20 years of your life? Or
with my interest in aviation, and that I can make a living out of flight surgeon, out of a flight surgeon office, there is almost no way of getting that in the civilian world. So I'm very much inclined to do this for the rest of my life. But anything can happen with the military regarding being moved to another place. And as you heard, I'm married to a wonderful wife. And so I have to take that into consideration also. So
yes, of course.
If she has got a job here and I have to move to the exact opposite direction and opposite corner of Germany, that would make it very unattractive to stay with the military.
Yes, you have to make choices with your life, and I suppose live with the consequences.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you again so much for your time. It's good to hear your voice. Like you said, I know you've been busy. I hope you managed to make some more time for us, but I appreciate you've got your priorities, and you're doing wonderful things. So
if you were to fly earlier at the day, we could talk about a lot of stuff, but my alarm goes at 4:30 in the morning.
No, there's scope there. There's scope there with the
2 o'clock Zulu, and if we start at 19 Zulu with our missions,
it might not be with me, but I think there's probably some people who could fit those. Like the Australians and the Southeast Asians. There's stuff that could happen there. But all right. Well, yes. Thank you for your time, and thank you for indulging us with some stories. It's been great listening and finding out more about your life and the work you do. And I hope the listeners enjoyed it. And thanks everyone for listening. And I'll catch everybody on the next LovoCast.